Okay, hello, my name is Arthur Anglad. Um, here, here I am today to try out a playthrough of the Stanley Parable. Fairly, interesting game, multiple endings, sort of emergent gameplay and all that. Well, why don't we get started? Begin the game. See what they got for us. Mind me, I just have a soda here.
This is the story of a man named Stanley.
Here we go.
Stanley worked for a company in a big building where he was employee number 427. Employee number 427's job was simple. He sat at his desk in room 427 and he pushed buttons on a keyboard. Orders came to him through a monitor on his desk, telling him what buttons to push, how long to push them, and in what order. This is what
Sounds
employee
like a really
427
boring job,
did
to be
every
honest.
day of every month of every year. And although others might have considered it soul-rending, Stanley relished every moment that the orders came in, as though he had been made exactly for this job. And Stanley was happy.
I wouldn't be.
And then one day, something very peculiar happened. Something that would forever change Stanley. Something he would never quite forget. He had been at his desk for nearly an hour when he realized that not one single order had arrived on the monitor for him to follow. No one had showed up to give him instructions, call a meeting, or even say hi. Never in all his years at the company had this happened, this complete isolation. Something was very clearly wrong. Shocked, frozen solid, Stanley found himself unable to move for the longest time. But as he came to his wits and regained his senses, he got up from his desk and stepped out of his office.
Okay, I can move now. Yeah, Stanley, I don't know why you, just stay here for an hour, not doing a damn thing, just because no one told you to do anything. That's kind of creepy. It almost makes us feel like it's a horror game, but it's not. It's definitely not. Anyways, trying to figure out why I'm all alone.
All of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean? Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo. No matter how hard Stanley looked, he couldn't find a trace of his co-workers.
Almost makes you wonder if there were any other co-workers to begin with. Since he stayed in his desk all day, I'm assuming everybody else does too. I wonder if any of the employees know each other. Nope, can't open that. That's lame. Okay, full disclosure, I am not very good at controlling things on the keyboard. The WASD thing, not for me. Much prefer a controller.
When Stanley came to a set of 2 open doors, he entered the door on his left.
On my left, you say. One of the disappointing things about this game is that you can't go back and actually redo your choices. Once you go through a door, that's it. That door closes.
Yet there was not a single person here either. Feeling a wave of disbelief, Stanley decided to go up to his boss's office, hoping he might find an answer there.
Okay. But if everyone is unique, is anyone unique? That's the real question. Yeah. I'm gonna leave now. And there goes that door.
Coming to a staircase, Stanley walked upstairs to his boss's office.
We'll do as the narrator says for now. Yeah, like I said, I'm not good at this. Look, I mean, yeah, I want to see his fancy toilet. Alright, fine then, be that way. Maybe the door doesn't even match the rest of the room. Psh, lame. That doesn't do anything.
Stepping into his manager's office, Stanley was once again stunned to discover not an indication of any human life. Shocked, unraveled, Stanley wondered in disbelief who orchestrated this. What dark secret was being held from him? What he could not have known was that the keypad behind the boss's desk guarded the terrible truth that his boss had been keeping from him. And so the boss had assigned it an extra secret PIN number, 2845. But of course, Stanley couldn't possibly have known this.
What you don't know, Mr. Narrator, is that I'm kind of a god in this world. Well, in a way.
Stanley just sat around twiddling his thumbs. Trying to input anything on the device was useless, since he could never possibly know that the combination was 2845.
Okay.
Yet incredibly, by simply pushing random buttons on the keypad, Stanley happened to input the correct code by sheer luck. Amazing. He stepped into the newly opened passageway.
Huh. And yeah, it didn't close this time. But I'm sure this will. Mm-hmm.
Descending deeper into the building, Stanley realized he felt a bit peculiar. It was a stirring of emotion in his chest, as though he felt more free to think for himself, to question the nature of his job. Why did he feel this now, when for years it had never occurred to him? This question would not go unanswered for long.
Well, damn. As soon as I step off, the lights suddenly don't work. Oh, I must admit, it's definitely easier to see.
Stanley walked straight ahead through the large door that read Mind Control Facility.
Definitely easier to see right now than it was the last time I tried playing this. Ooh, there's an escape hatch. Okay, well, clearly I know that going here will not let me escape. I'll do that some other time.
The lights rose on an enormous room packed with television screens. What horrible secret did this place hold? Stanley thought to himself. Did he have the strength to find out?
Stanley's plenty strong, thank you.
Now the monitors jumped to life, their true nature revealed. Each bore the number of an employee in the building, Stanley's co-workers. The lives of so many individuals reduced to images on a screen, and Stanley, one of them, eternally monitored in this place where freedom meant nothing.
What I want to know is exactly how did they control you? It just says you're being monitored. Or at least that's what I can gather. Exactly what was controlling you? The computer?
This mind control facility, it was too horrible to believe. It couldn't be true. Had Stanley really been under someone's control all this time? Was this the only reason he was happy with his boring job? That his emotions had been manipulated to accept it blindly?
A lot of questioning why this happened, but not a lot of how. So, you know.
No, he refused to believe it. He couldn't accept it. His own life in someone else's control? Never. It was unthinkable, wasn't it? Was it even possible? Had he truly spent his entire life utterly blind to the world?
Well, about however long he spent working here. I don't even know how he got hired.
But here was the proof. The heart of the operation. Controls labeled with emotions. Happy, or sad, or content. Walking, eating, working. All of it monitored and commanded from this very place. And as the cold reality of his past began to sink in, Stanley decided that this machinery would never again exert its terrible power over another human life. For he would dismantle the controls once and for all.
None of the buttons seems to be doing anything. Well, except maybe that one. Nope, this button doesn't do anything either. Nope. Which way was it? Looks like go up the stairs. Nope, that doesn't do it. No, that's not the right way. Oh. Duh, silly power. Been staring at me this entire time.
And when at last he found the source of the room's power, he knew it was his duty, his obligation, to put an end to this horrible place and to everything it stood for.
Okay.
Blackness and a rising chill of uncertainty. Was it over?
Can't see anything.
Yes. He had won. He had defeated the machine, unshackled himself from someone else's command. Freedom was mere moments away. And yet, even as the immense door slowly opened, Stanley reflected on how many puzzles still lay unsolved. Where had his co-workers gone? How had he been freed from the machine's grasp?
Where did the console go?
What other mysteries did this strange building hold? But as sunlight streamed into the chamber, he realized none of this mattered to him. For it was not knowledge or even power that he had been seeking, but happiness. Perhaps his goal had not been to understand, but to let go. No longer would anyone tell him where to go, what to do, or how to feel. Whatever life he lives, it will be his. And that was all he needed to know. It was perhaps the only thing worth knowing. Stanley stepped through the open door. Stanley felt the cool breeze upon his skin, the feeling of liberation, the immense possibility of the new path before him. This was exactly the way, right now, that things were meant to happen. And Stanley was happy.
Huh. That's one ending. We do everything the guy says and we're free. And now we're back here. So did we really leave at all?
All of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean? Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo.
I want to check out that so-called escape.
When Stanley came to a set of 2 open doors, he entered the door on his left. Yet there was not a single person here either. Feeling a wave of disbelief, Stanley decided to go up to his boss's office, hoping he might find an answer there.
Here.
Coming to a staircase, Stanley walked upstairs to his boss's office.
Office of the executive bathroom that you can't look at.
Stepping into his manager's office, Stanley was once again stunned to discover not an indication of any human life. What could it mean? Stanley wondered aloud to nobody. He began wildly tearing through papers on the boss's desk, pulling books off the shelf, looking behind paintings, desperate for clues to his situation. But his attention was caught by a keypad behind the boss's desk. What could its purpose be? In fact, this keypad guarded the terrible secret that lay buried below his feet. And so the boss had assigned it an extra secret PIN number, 2845. But of course, Stanley couldn't possibly have known this.
I tear through everything on his desk and everything, but I can't actually.
Stanley just sat around twiddling his thumbs. Trying to input anything on the device was useless, since he could never possibly know that the combination was 2845. Yet incredibly, by simply pushing random buttons on the keypad, Stanley happened to input the correct code by sheer luck. Amazing. He stepped into the newly opened passageway. Stanley walked straight ahead through the large door that read Mind Control Facility.
Now, let's see what happens if I go this way instead.
Although this passageway had the word escape written on it, the truth was that at the end of this hall, Stanley would meet his violent death.
Violent death? Jesus. You're just gonna tell me that straight up?
The door behind him was not shut. Stanley still had every opportunity to turn around and get back on track. At this point, Stanley was making a conscious, concerted effort to walk forward and willingly confront his death.
Oh boy. Yep.
As the machine whirred into motion and Stanley was inched closer and closer to his demise, he reflected that his life had been of no consequence whatsoever. Stanley can't see the bigger picture. He doesn't know the real story, trapped forever in his narrow vision of what this world is. Perhaps his death was of no great loss, like plucking the eyeballs from a blind man. So he resigned and willingly accepted this violent end to his brief and shallow life. Farewell, Stanley.
Oh boy.
"Farewell, Stanley," cried the narrator, as Stanley was led helplessly into the enormous metal jaws. In a single visceral instant, Stanley was obliterated as the machine crushed every bone in his body, killing him instantly.
Or not.
And yet it would be just a few minutes before Stanley would restart the game, back in his office, as alive as ever. What exactly did the narrator think he was going to accomplish?
Okay.
When every path you can walk has been created for you long in advance, death becomes meaningless, making life the same. Do you see now? Do you see that Stanley was already dead from the moment he hit start?
Wow, okay, that's one way to go about it. I haven't seen this ending, for sure. This is a museum of Stanley's entire life. Since apparently he didn't really exist before he started working at whatever company this is. I like 5 the best. Someone was playing solitaire. The credits. Oh, this is basically just showing you all the assets for everything. Early in development, redesign and ending where Stanley would end up on the battlefield fighting aliens. The action game was become sentient and we wage war against the narrator. We realized shortly after starting to build it that it was far too jokey and on the nose for the tone of the game. Plus, some people interpreted it as if it was making fun of people who like shooters, which is not our intention. They should have gone with it anyways. That would have been great. The game is now paused. Yeah, this museum just shows off like all the assets for the entire game. now? How do I get out of here?
Now, this elevator for sure would get him right back on track to where he was supposed to be in the story. Stanley walked over the bridge. Then he pushed the grate. When Stanley came to the lift, he traveled upward to the power source at the top of the facility to end his injuries.
Oh, I can move faster. And then, I'm not sure there's really anywhere else I can go. Oh, okay.
Oh, look at these two. How they wish to destroy one another. How they wish to control one another. How they both wish to be free.
There it goes.
Can you see? Can you see how much they need one another? No, perhaps not. Sometimes these things cannot be seen. But listen to me. You can still save these two. You can stop the program before they both fail. Push escape and press quit. There's no other way to beat this game. As long as you move forward, you'll be walking someone else's path. Stop now and it'll be your only true choice. Whatever you do, choose it. Don't let time choose for you. Don't let time...
Well. Yeah, that happened. Okay, well, the game is still going. Oh, there's nothing else happening. I mean, she did say I was dead from the start. Alright, begin the game again. We'll do one more ending.
All of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean? Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo.
I'm gonna go through the left door again, but this time I'll go down the stairs instead.
When Stanley came to a set of 2 open doors, he entered the door on his left. Yet there was not a single person here either. Feeling a wave of disbelief, Stanley decided to go up to his boss's office, hoping he might find an answer there. Coming to a staircase, Stanley walked upstairs to his boss's office.
Let's go downstairs instead.
But Stanley just couldn't do it. He considered the possibility of facing his boss, admitting he had left his post during work hours. He might be fired for that. And in such a competitive economy, why had he taken that risk? All because he believed everyone had vanished? His boss would think he was crazy. And then something occurred to Stanley. Maybe, he thought to himself, maybe I am crazy. All of my co-workers blinking mysteriously out of existence in a single moment for no reason at all? None of it made any logical sense. And as Stanley pondered this, he began to make other strange observations. For example, why couldn't he see his feet when he looked down? Why did doors close automatically behind him wherever he went? And for that matter, these rooms were starting to look pretty familiar. Were they simply repeating? No, Stanley said to himself, this is all too strange. This can't be real. And at last, he came to the conclusion that had been on the tip of his tongue. He just hadn't found the words for it. "I'm dreaming!" he yelled. "This is all a dream." Oh, what a relief Stanley felt to have finally found an answer, an explanation. His co-workers weren't actually gone. He wasn't going to lose his job. He wasn't crazy after all. And he thought to himself, I suppose I'll wake up soon. I'll have to go back to my boring real-life job pushing buttons. I may as well enjoy this while I'm still lucid. So, he imagined himself flying and began to gently float above the ground. Then he imagined himself soaring through space on a magical starfield, and it too appeared. It was so much fun, and Stanley marveled that he had still not woken up. How was he remaining so lucid? And then perhaps the strangest question of them all entered Stanley's head. One he was amazed he hadn't asked himself sooner. Why is there a voice in my head dictating everything that I'm doing and thinking? Now the voice was describing itself being considered by Stanley, who found it particularly strange. I'm dreaming about a voice describing me, thinking about how it's describing my thoughts, he thought. And while he thought it all very odd and wondered if this voice spoke to all people in their dreams, the truth was that, of course, this was not a dream. How could it be? Was Stanley simply deceiving himself, believing that if he's asleep, he doesn't have to take responsibility for himself? Stanley is as awake right now as he's ever been in his life. Now, hearing the voice speak these words was quite a shock to Stanley. After all, he knew for certain, beyond a doubt, that this was in fact a dream. Did the voice not see him float and make the magical stars just a moment ago? How else would the voice explain all that? This voice was a part of himself too. Surely, if he could just... He would prove it. He would prove that he was in control, that this was a dream. So he closed his eyes gently, and he invited himself to wake up. He felt the cool weight of the blanket on his skin, the press of the mattress on his back, the fresh air of the world outside this one. Let me wake up, he thought to himself. I'm through with this dream. I wish it to be over. Let me go back to my job. Let me continue pushing the buttons. Please, it's all I want. I want my apartment and my wife and my job. All I want is my life exactly the way it's always been. My life is normal. I am normal. Everything will be fine. I am okay. Stanley began screaming. Please, someone, wake me up. My name is Stanley. I have a boss, I have an office, I am real. Please, just someone tell me I am real. I must be real, I must be. Can anyone hear my voice? Who am I? Who am I? And everything went black. This is the story of a woman named Mariella.
What?
Mariella woke up on a day like any other. She arose, got dressed, gathered her belongings, and walked to her place of work. But on this particular day, her walk was interrupted by the body of a man who had stumbled through town talking and screaming to himself, and then collapsed dead on the sidewalk. And although she would soon turn to go call for an ambulance, for just a few brief moments, she considered the strange man. He was obviously crazy. This much she knew. Everyone knows what crazy people look like. And in that moment, she thought to herself how lucky she was to be normal. I am sane. I am in control of my mind. I know what is real and what isn't. It was comforting to think this, and in a certain way, seeing this man made her feel better. But then she remembered the meeting she had scheduled for that day, the very important people whose impressions of her would affect her career, and by extension, the rest of her life. She had no time for this, so it was only a moment that she stood there, staring down at the body. And then she turned and ran.
Welp. That's one way to go out. And here I am once again. I'll do one more.
The meeting room. Yes, that's where everyone would be. Stanley just needed to get to the meeting room, and from then on, he would never be alone ever again.
Ever again, huh?
When Stanley came to a set of 2 open doors, he entered the door on his left. Yet there was not a single person here either. Feeling a wave of disbelief, Stanley decided to go up to his boss's office, hoping he might find an answer there. Coming to a staircase, Stanley walked upstairs to his boss's office. But Stanley just couldn't do it. He considered the possibility of facing his boss. Admitting he had left his post during work hours, he might be fired for that. And in such a competitive economy, why had he taken that risk? All because he believed everyone had vanished? His boss would think he was crazy. And then something occurred to Stanley. Maybe, he thought to himself, maybe I am crazy. All of my co-workers blinking mysteriously out of existence in a single moment for no reason at all.
I see.
None of it made any logical sense.
Once you come down here,
and as Stanley pondered this,
it.
he began to make other strange observations.
That there is for you.
For example, why couldn't he see his feet when he looked down? Why did doors close automatically behind him wherever he went? And for that matter, these rooms were starting to look pretty familiar. Were they simply repeating? No, Stanley said to himself, this is all too strange. This can't be real. And at last, he came to the conclusion that had been on the tip of his tongue. He just hadn't found the words for it. I'm dreaming, he yelled. This is all a dream.
Yeah, I'm chill on this. In fact, yeah, I think I've exhausted most of what I can do from going on the left door. So maybe I'll do this again some other time, but for now, I think I'm going to call it. Yeah. So that's the canon ending where you've leave the mind control facility, the ending where you end up in a museum of your own life and still end up dying, and the ending where you're going through a series of repeating rooms forever until you end up dead on the sidewalk. I think there are like 10 endings, 20 endings. I'm not sure. In any case, that's it for me. I'm gonna catch some Z's. Goodbye later, and have a good one. You know, whatever it is that the YouTubers do.